a 3,000-pound weapon traveling at 550 miles per hour, threading between mountains, under bridges, around buildings for over 1,000 miles. And it can do all of this without a single satellite signal. When I started researching this, I assumed GPS was everything. What I found completely changed how I think about military navigation. After this video, you'll understand exactly how cruise missiles find their targets, why they were deadly accurate before GPS even existed, and the backup system that makes them nearly impossible to stop. Let's get into it. Here's the fundamental problem with guiding anything over long distances. You need to know where you are to figure out where you're going. Sounds obvious, but think about what that actually means for a cruise missile. You're flying at 50 feet altitude. That's roughly a 4-story building off the ground. You're moving at 550 miles per hour. You're traveling over terrain you've never seen before, and you need to hit a specific window of a specific building 1,000 miles away. That's like throwing a dart from New York and hitting a bullseye in Denver, blindfolded. The margin for error? Less than 10 feet over a journey of over 1 million yards. That's an accuracy requirement of 0.0002%. Think of it like this. If you walked from your house to a coffee shop 6 miles away, a 0.0002% error would put you within 1 inch of your target every single time. Keep that in mind, because everything that follows builds on this impossible precision. The first solution was inertial navigation. And on paper, it sounds perfect. Here's how it works. You mount incredibly precise gyroscopes and accelerometers inside the missile. From the moment of launch, these sensors track every movement, every acceleration, every turn, every change in speed. By integrating all that motion data, the system calculates exactly where it is at any moment. No external signals required. Completely unjammable. Elegant. Except for one devastating problem. Drift. Even the best inertial systems accumulate tiny errors, maybe 0.1% per hour. That sounds negligible until you do the math. Over a 3-hour flight, those errors compound. A Tomahawk missile using only inertial navigation would miss its target by roughly half a mile. That's not precision strike, that's an expensive gesture. The early cruise missiles of the 1970s faced exactly this limitation. Engineers had a weapon that could fly 1,000 miles, but couldn't actually hit anything specific when it got there. That solved one problem, autonomous navigation, but created another even larger one. So what do you do when you need no external signals and pinpoint accuracy? This is where it gets genuinely clever. Here's how modern cruise missiles actually navigate. 3 core principles. Principle 1, terrain memory. The missile carries a detailed 3-dimensional map of the terrain along its flight path. Not the whole Earth, just a ribbon of landscape maybe 6 miles wide along its planned route. As it flies, a radar altimeter constantly measures the ground below. The missile compares these real-time altitude readings against its stored map. When the patterns match, it knows exactly where it is. Think of it like reading Braille at 550 miles per hour. The missile feels the shape of the Earth and matches it against what it memorized before launch. This system is called TERCOM, Terrain Contour Matching, and here's what makes it brilliant. You can't jam terrain. Mountains don't have an off switch. Rivers don't need satellites. Principle 2, visual confirmation. TERCOM gets the missile close, but for the final approach, you need something even more precise. Enter DSM-AC, Digital Scene, Matching Area Correlator. The missile carries a camera and a library of photographs showing what the target area looks like from above. In the final miles, the missile takes real-time images and compares them against those stored pictures. It's looking for specific visual landmarks, a bend in a road, a distinctive building, the corner of a parking lot. The accuracy here is extraordinary. DSM-AC can achieve precision within 3 feet. That's where the real genius comes in. Principle 3, layered redundancy. GPS absolutely exists on modern cruise missiles, but it's not the primary system. It's a supplement. The missile constantly cross-references all 3 sources: inertial navigation, TERCOM terrain matching, and GPS signals. If GPS gets jammed, TERCOM keeps working. If the terrain is flat and featureless, like ocean or desert, GPS fills the gap. If everything electronic fails, inertial navigation provides a baseline. These systems don't compete, they correct each other. Every few seconds, the missile asks, do all 3 sources agree on where I am? If yes, proceed. If not, trust the one that can't be fooled. the terrain. Can you see how each principle solves a specific impossibility? But here's what nobody asks about. How do you create those terrain maps in the first place? Before a cruise missile can read the Earth, someone has to write the book. During the Cold War, this was perhaps the biggest intelligence challenge of the entire program. American satellites and reconnaissance aircraft spent years mapping Soviet terrain. Every valley, every ridgeline, every distinctive hill. Here's something that will surprise you. The maps needed to be more accurate than the missile itself. If your terrain data has a 30-foot error, your missile inherits that error regardless of how good its sensors are. The Defense Mapping Agency created terrain databases so detailed they could distinguish a hill from a building at 50 feet altitude. This required processing satellite imagery that was classified higher than the missiles themselves. A Tomahawk missile isn't just a weapon, it's the final product of decades of Earth observation. Now here's the question you should be asking. What happens when the missile reaches somewhere that wasn't mapped? The man who made terrain navigation work was an engineer named Paul Kaminsky. In 1972, TERCOM was a concept that most guidance experts considered theoretically interesting, but practically impossible. The computing power required to match terrain profiles in real time simply didn't exist in a package small enough to fit on a missile. Kaminsky and his team at McDonnell Douglas spent 3 years solving problems everyone said couldn't be solved. They stripped the algorithm down to its essentials. They invented compression techniques for terrain data. They pushed hardware limits that manufacturers said were absolute. By 1975, they were ready to prove everyone wrong. The first TERCOM guided test flight launched from White Sands. The missile flew 400 miles over desert terrain, some of the most featureless landscape in North America, and hit within 30 feet of target. Kaminsky reportedly watched the telemetry in silence. When the impact coordinates came through, he said 4 words: "Now we can fight." None of this comes cheap. A single Tomahawk costs roughly $2 million. To put that in perspective, you could buy 40 new cars for the price of one cruise missile. But here's the surprising part. Most of that cost isn't the explosive warhead or the jet engine. It's the navigation system. The gyroscopes alone cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. The TERCOM mapping software requires classified terrain data that took decades and billions of dollars to compile. And there's a critical limitation. TERCOM doesn't work over water. There are no terrain features to match in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. This is why cruise missiles launched from ships often follow indirect routes. They need to fly over land to update their position before approaching the target. Here's something that will surprise you. The early versions had a 20% failure rate in testing. Not from bad navigation, from terrain maps that didn't match reality. A new road, a demolished building, a redirected river could confuse the system completely. Now here's the crucial point, the thing that changes everything you think you know about cruise missiles. You've probably heard that GPS jamming is a threat to precision weapons, that modern militaries can create bubbles of scrambled satellite signals that render guided weapons useless. Here's the truth, a cruise missile doesn't care.
Jam the GPS? It reads the terrain. Spoof the satellites with false signals. TERCOM catches the contradiction. The only way to truly blind a cruise missile is to reshape the Earth itself.
This is why these weapons remain devastating 50 years after TERCOM was invented. The navigation isn't based on signals. It's based on geography. Let me be clear about this. Cruise missiles don't follow directions. They read the Earth. That's the secret. In January 1991, during the opening hours of Operation Desert Storm, 52 Tomahawk missiles launched from ships in the Red Sea and Persian Gulf. Their targets: Iraqi Air Defense Headquarters in downtown Baghdad. The missiles flew over 400 miles of desert and urban terrain at night without GPS coordinates being transmitted, while Iraqi air defenses scrambled to respond. 48 hit their targets, a success rate of over 90% on the first night of the first major combat use. The Iraqi military's first indication of attack wasn't radar warning. It wasn't the sound of approaching aircraft. It was buildings exploding. Since then, over 2,000 Tomahawks have been fired in combat operations. The system that engineers called practically impossible in 1972 has become the weapon that opens every modern American military operation. So next time someone tells you GPS guides cruise missiles, you'll know the truth. They don't follow directions. They read the Earth. That's the secret. And speaking of weapons that seem impossible, in the next video, we're breaking down how the Iron Dome actually intercepts rockets mid-flight. Spoiler, it doesn't predict where the rocket is going. It predicts where the rocket will be, and what happens in those 3 seconds defies everything you think you know about interception. You won't want to miss it. But first, which navigation principle impressed you most? Terrain matching, visual confirmation, or layered redundancy? Drop your answer in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.